So a White House memo from the OMB is telling federal agencies to prepare for mass layoffs in the event the government shuts down. So after September 30th, if there is no funding agreement, if there is no CR, continuing resolution, then the Trump administration is directing agencies to conduct mass layoffs, RIFs, to send out RIF notices, reduction in force. Now, for a little context, this year we're seeing over 300,000 federal workers leave the government. So worst case scenario here, what we're talking about is upwards of 700,000. That's how many federal workers would be furloughed. On average, if the government shuts down, it's around 600 to 700,000 people that are furloughed, meaning that they don't get paid currently, or they don't get paid while they're working, but when the government is not shut down anymore, they get back pay. Well, this would completely get rid of that. They would be terminated permanently. They would not be getting any back pay. So why is this happening? Well, in the words of a lot of Democrats, they're seeing this as an intimidation technique in order to pass the CR they want to pass. Because the Democrats, they had a meeting with the president scheduled for today, but it didn't happen. The president didn't want to meet with them. Really, the Democrats, they don't have very much leverage. They were trying to use this shutdown as potential leverage to try to reverse some Medicaid cuts, some Medicare cuts, or to reverse some of the Affordable Care Act cuts. But they're not going to do that. Really, the Democrats, they don't really have that much leverage. The leverage that they did have was potentially trying to get something to avert a government shutdown. And now it looks like the Trump administration is positioning this government shutdown that if it does happen, it is the Democrats' fault. So ultimately, if these federal workers lose their job, he wants to paint the picture that it's going to be the Democrats who are to blame because they should have just accepted it. And why do they need to accept it? Some people are confused on this. In the Senate, they need 60 votes still. You still need 60 votes in the Senate so you can get around the filibuster. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. That's why they need some Democrats to come in and actually vote for it. So that's what it's about. The bottom line really is the federal agencies, they have to draft RIF notices for employees in programs, projects, or activities where the discretionary funding, it ends on October 1st. And it's not covered by the big, beautiful bill, and it's not lined up with President Trump's priorities. And this is going to impact agencies differently. So probably not as much when you're looking at the Department of War or the Department of Homeland Security, but probably a lot agencies like EPA, Department of Interior, maybe even HUD, they could face more cuts, I would say. Now, even if a shutdown is averted and it doesn't happen, the agencies still have to revise RIF plans. Now, when I first read that, I'm thinking, well, were they not supposed to do this already? The only difference here, from what I can tell, is they're making it fit the narrative of the shutdown. So if the shutdown happens, then this must occur. Another big change is, unlike the last shutdown, which happened during President Trump's first term, that lasted 35 days over the funding of a wall. Well, this time, agencies are being barred from repurposing or transferring funds to mitigate the impacts. So they're not able to do that anymore. And OMB hasn't posted any public contingency plans either, so that has a lot of people concerned. The way that government shutdowns typically work, the agencies are struggling to prepare for it as it's coming a week out, days before it hits. There's all this time, energy, resources devoted to the plan. What's going to happen? How can we make sure that critical programs keep running? Who's going to be coming into the office? All of that planning takes place. Now, let's say the government actually shuts down. Well, then there's this whole restart period. So it's a giant waste of time for everyone involved. Not only is it a waste of time, it's really a serious waste of taxpayer dollars. But there are essential employees that still have to come in, a lot of them. In some cases, you could be looking at close to 1 million people that still have to come in. And then you have core programs that have to keep functioning no matter what's going on. So if you look at the military, that's going to keep on rolling along. Social Security, that's going to keep happening. Border protection, border security, border patrol, ICE, CBP, all of that still has to keep going no matter what happens. Now, Democrats are calling this an attempt at intimidation. They're saying mafia-style blackmail. That's what they're calling it. And they're predicting the court will reverse a lot of this, and there will be potentially rehires if it goes through. Now, there's not very much that the Democrats can do right now. There's not too many tools in their toolkit, unfortunately. So if it does go the legal route, everyone's going to be suffering on the sidelines. It'll take a lot of time. And by that time, people are going to be looking at, potentially getting a different job. I think largely this is an attempt to get Chuck Schumer to get the Democrats in line and to just sign off on whatever the Republicans want. And if Chuck Schumer calls their bluff, if this actually happens, now here's another thing. It's not a novel concept that the Trump administration wants to reduce the size of the federal workforce, but consider that attrition has been bleeding it all year long. You have upwards over 300,000 people leaving the federal workforce, and now you're proposing of potentially firing hundreds of thousands more. If that were to happen, I think it's hard to imagine the amount of public backlash that would occur when people start feeling the effects of not having the services that they previously took for granted. They're not there. I think it would be a huge problem. And I think this is probably more of along the lines of a bluff. And it could work. I mean, Chuck Schumer could fold and say, okay, whatever you want, I'm here. I'm here for you. Give me the pen. I'll sign. It could come down to that. But I don't envision this plan happening to the extent where we see hundreds of thousands of more federal workers. It's just hard to believe. Now, as far as the government shutdown, if you look at Polymarket, which is essentially a prediction market, it is currently stating that 70% government shutdown is 70% likely. And what type of shutdown? Because it breaks it into different categories. It is showing that the most likely shutdown would be over 8 days. So not a short one, not under a week. There's a 60% chance of it going over 8 days. That's what the market is thinking. That's what the money is saying. So whether or not there is a shutdown, I think it's more than likely. But in addition to this, it's not all bad news. There were some good bills that were introduced into Congress not too long ago. Some of these bills could increase your pay by a substantial amount. But the big question is, will it get passed? We know that there's a Republican majority in the House and the Senate, so will it get passed? If you want to know a little bit more about that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.